Hello there, Steve here in Sydney of the Lay Gnosis website, truebluehealer.com. I've just got something to tell you about the skeptic movement generally. It's now being noticed by observers that it's collapsing, falling apart, diminishing to practically zero. James Randi's prize has apparently, the Paranormal $1 Million Prize, been discontinued. This was signalled some 2 years ago, but it's not widely known about, so I'll tell you now. The Paranormal Prize has been discontinued, apparently. Robert McLuhan's book about Randi's prize basically says, with a lot of underpinning argument, very convincing argument, and polite argument, that the skeptics, all the points they make are all based on lying, twisting, distortion, fraud, and ignoring of the facts, which caused him to raise the question, what the hell are they really doing? That was in the book Randi's Prize. There's reviews of it, and you can obtain it as an e-book, I believe, a Kindle reader book from Amazon. Even more forceful now is Chris Carter's book. I've got it on left panel here for you, where he talks about the fall of the House of Skeptics, because really it was at best a house of cards that never really had any substance to it. It was simply, what can I say, unbelief, loud aggressive unbelief. And when noted writers make these statements in the names of books, it really tells you something about the skeptic movement's demise. So the skeptic movement, analysed by esteemed British journalist Robert McLuhan, where he exposes everything they say as having no basis in fact or reality, but only being invective, basically, and denigration. The propositions they put exist entirely in their own heads. They cannot convince anyone else. The skeptics don't convince anybody. Their movement has shrunk. They've actually gone backwards. Chris Carter talks about the fall of the House of Skeptics in his book also. And so you've really got to ask the question, what were the skeptics ever about? Well, it seems to be a lot of D words that come to mind when you just see, after years of discussing and watching them, discussing with them, watching them, seeing what they say back to you over many years, they seem to be about one thing, cruelty to other people. That's the dominant theme. I'll say this out loud, a criminal cruelty. There, I can say this. Nice authors who want a wide readership probably wouldn't say that, but I'll say it. It's a criminal cruelty they intend to do to anyone they can hold in a conversation. So basically it's a criminal cruelty that they wish to inflict on anybody, and it seems to come up with a whole lot of words beginning with D, like denigration, demolition, include despoil, denigrate, destroy, destabilise, dehumanize, destruct. These are all the themes I've noticed over the years, dialoguing with these people, watching all their entries against other people, that sort of thing. And basically they're just out to do as much damage as they can. What can I say? Intellectual damage, emotional damage to other people. Another word comes to mind is that virtually everything they say is derogatory. It's basically sneering at anyone they can hold in conversation. And the motivation behind that seems to be primitive, infantile one-upmanship, like you hear in playgrounds, I'm better than you. Now, here's the good news. Though the House of Cards, the House of Skeptics, is collapsing in a heap, they've actually had the opposite effect to what they desired, and what they've done is basically stampede people toward having a greater interest in the paranormal, afterlife, and that sort of thing, and spiritual explanations of things. So the skeptic movement has actually had, which seems to come out of fundamentalist religious America seems to have had a positive effect on driving people, stampeding people toward interest in telepathy, psychic phenomena, that sort of thing, which is why it's all over the television today. An example of the utter and total failure of the skeptic movement is that they've been unable to stop. They've probably made a difference propelling onto the television screen the wonderful New Zealand program Sensing Murder, where two highly gifted mediums, sometimes there's a couple of pairs of them, highly gifted mediums are able to make contact with murdered people and actually obtain names of the murderers and that sort of thing. Now, you might say that's just tabloid television, but it certainly is not. Because here's the killer blow, the rabbit chop for the skeptic movement. After the Paranormal Prize and James Randi is rendered utterly irrelevant by this single rabbit chop development on television today. That is, the New Zealand police now ask the Sensing Murder program to assist them officially. This is on television. New Zealand police ask the program to assist them in gaining more information about baffling cases, mysterious behaviours, where someone seems to have committed suicide, but there is evidence uncovered by two different psychics on 2 different days that it was actually murder, and they both supplied on 2 different days, 2 different psychics, the same full name of the murderer. So the police are going to use this method, though they don't understand how it works. So it leaves the skeptics nowhere. They haven't got a case to answer. They're not going to dispute the police, surely. Bastions of conservatism and skepticism. Far more reliable skeptics are the police forces of the world than any skeptic group. The huge difference between skeptic groups and all their lying accusations is that they can lie in the public domain with no problem whatsoever. It's quite profitable to lie in the public domain. It gets you controversial attention. But the police can't do that. They can go to jail for lying in court and falsely convicting people. So they have to tell the truth. They are far more reliable skeptics, and believe me, far more methodical skeptics than any skeptic group of amateurs. That's all the skeptics ever were, the James Randi lot, the James Randi devotees. So leading the world today are New Zealand police actually using television psychics to help solve baffling crimes, which leaves Randi's devotees, the skeptic movement, Richard Wiseman, CSICOP, nowhere. They are irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. And one of the here's where we can boot the skeptic movement out of the stadium, so to speak. Their accusation is that mediums are just cold reading people. Well, if they can get people in spirit, murdered people, to supply the names of their murderer via cold reading, then let's see it. Maybe $1 million challenge to the skeptics via cold reading to help the police discover murderers by talking to deceased murder victims. How about that? Maybe $1 million prize for doing that via cold reading. I really can't see them doing that because there's no one to cold read, which makes a total mockery of the cold reading charge, which is such a hollow charge from the pseudo-skeptics. So all we can do is laugh at them. Are we ever going to see skeptics in the back of police cars guiding police via cold reading to find dead bodies and the like? Is that going to happen via cold reading? I don't think so. I think the skeptics have certainly passed their use-by date, and anything positive that might have come out of their very, very negative activities seems to be an unintended proofing of paranormal research against skeptic objections, which are always pretty groundless anyway. But modern day scientists investigating the paranormal, ESP, that sort of thing, have ready-made answers for any skeptic objections now, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about something wonderful. Certainly proof of afterlife beyond reasonable doubt, certainly enough to gain a conviction in a court, is something called the skull experiment. That's a 1.5-hour documentary on a 2-year-long investigation into mediums and physical mediumship and contact with discarnate spirits. Now, it was very carefully modulated, mediated and operated by some peer-reviewed scientists who did engage, wait for it, did engage the services of a senior magician to make sure that no fraud could be possible. This is to meet all the skeptics' objections, you see. Anyway, Dr. David Fontana is one of the peer-reviewed scientists who operated the skull experiment for a number of years. They obtained some wonderful physical demonstrations of discarnate entities, apparently spirits, deceased people, actually doing things on request. Now, Dr. David Fontana's few minutes discussion about the skull experiment is very, very enlightening. It's a very animated discussion, very profound, covers a very wide gamut of things that you would like to know, and it's only about 15-20 minutes long or something. So, well worth looking at is Dr. David Fontana. Now, orange block to click on this video while I just keep talking will take you straight to that David Fontana interview where he describes, pay full attention to this video, it's only a few minutes, and he gives you one hell of a rodeo roundup of paranormal research and proof of afterlife, which is really proven beyond reasonable doubt, enough to score a conviction in a court case, would certainly convince a jury of average intelligent people. Okay, so I give you Dr. David Fontana just by pressing the link, the orange link at the bottom of this video. So I hope you're pressing it now. Ta-ta.